There we go. So what I normally do with these is I'll edit them. I'll put the YouTube version up on YouTube. I'll take the audio out. I'll make that the podcast, and then I'll take the unedited podcast where it's just from here on in and everything we've been talking about, and I'll put that up on the Patreon.
Right. I kind of do something similar where I just put out the unedited on our Patreon, and I take I usually don't use this for my podcast, but I have a second one where I record like this and I do something similar.
Oh, really? So you have two podcasts?
Yeah.
What's the second one then?
The cut. It's like a kind of discussion roundtable with my friends. It was my first foray into this before I came up with this idea for one mic.
We'll see what happens with that. So am I calling you CountryBoi, or what am I going to call you?
You can call me CountryBoi. You can call me, Mike. That's my real name. I kind of like CountryBoi as a pseudonym, but it's just dates back from my days playing Xbox or PlayStation. It's the name that I had. So when I got on here and we started doing the cut, I was like, well, I need a pseudonym. So I just rolled with this, and then I went into to one mic and just kind of roll with it.
Well, that makes sense though. So is that where one mic came from? Yeah.
That came from my name. It came, it's a bit, because my dad has a couple like media things that he likes to do. And so he has shows where he's like, Mike Inc. Because his name is Mike. I'm Junior. So I kind of was like homage to him. Like, hey, I got this idea from you, but also I only have one mic. My name's Mike. So it's kind of, funny play on words.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's a podcaster here in Toronto called Toronto Mike. And his name is Mike, but he goes to Toronto Mike with a apostrophe D.
Yeah.
And he just interviews local celebrities, like news people and musicians and stuff. And
is that where you're based? Out of Toronto?
Yep.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And what about you?
Lucky not to be in the States. I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Oh, yeah. Well, North Carolina is a nice place.
It is nice. It is nice. It's actually growing really, really rapidly. At least Charlotte is really, really rapidly. So we have a lot of transplants, people from, northern cities, because we have to have seasons. We have seasons here.
Yeah. In Canada, weather is like a go-to conversation starter. So let me just do a quick intro here.
Okay.
And I'll stick with CountryBoi and see how that goes.
That's fine.
And then just give me like a 2-minute breakdown of your show, and then we'll take it from there.
All right. Of course, I'm CountryBoi. My show is One Mic Black History. The idea of it started with just kind of the Tulsa massacre of 1921. So I watched The Watchmen, and I saw the very beginning of that show had the Tulsa massacre in it, and I thought that was really interesting. So I was like, hey, you know what? I should do a show on it, just off the cuff. I was just doing one mic at the time. I was just doing the cut at the time. And then it kind of expanded. I was like, well, you know what? I could do more than this. I can kind of create whole shows about, just incidents from Black history. And it kind of snowballed to the point where I could not do it. It got in my head to the point where I had to do this show. So from here, I started doing the research, and I realized that this was hard. It's really, really hard. So my first couple of episodes, I don't really like them that much. I'm actually tempted to go back and redo them, but most people say that shows growth. I guess. So anyway, I started working. I feel like I'm getting better with every single show. I'm getting more comfortable in front of the microphone. I don't have, even though it takes me a long time to do them, it's such a passion project for me that I kind of can't see myself not doing this, not creating this. I kind of feel like the cut was my first foray into podcasting, but this is like kind of like a masterclass. This is a one step up from the cut, because I think everyone's doing round table discussions. Not to discourage that, but I feel like this is a more pure form here that I'm doing.
Well, it's funny because when I go into Amazon, I see Amazon has it listed as an audiobook / they have it listed in Audible. Were you
Really?
aware of that?
No, it wasn't. I knew that I knew that they were working on some podcasting platform and they asked people to submit their podcasts, but I didn't know how they were going to do it. They didn't really give you a whole lot of information on how exactly they were going to go about, setting up your podcast on their platform.
Yeah, it shows has Audible, $0, listen now, 13 episodes as a listen with Audible.
Wow.
Yeah, so I don't know. And I saw it showed somewhere. I was trying to find it, but you won an award or one of the most history podcast award?
I was nominated for Discover Pod's History Podcast of the Year. So, and granted, I was just happy to be nominated because I listened to a lot of the other podcasts on this list, and I'm like, I don't feel comfortable. Not to disparage my own what I'm doing, but when you put yourself up against a corporate podcast that has a lot of money and it's very good. Like I'm just starting out. Half his episodes I don't even like myself, and now you're going to put me up against Malcolm Gladwell, who's I think he won author of the what's the author awards? One of those.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, he's a talented podcaster with a crew behind him, though, helping him do research.
Exactly. I'm sorry, I couldn't get it out. But basically, he has a crew behind him and scripts, and he's probably not even. They may not even write those scripts, but they're well done. And me, it's just one guy, just doing this whole production, and I just felt like I didn't really stand up to the rest of those guys. I don't have an audience behind me that they do. But either way, just being here, the journey was great. And honestly, it kind of, galvanized me to do more and to do better. So that next year, when I'm nominated again, I feel like I can stand toe to toe with those guys.
Dude, I love history podcasts. I'm all in on them. And that, helps. My wife works at a university in the history department, but I just like history podcasts. We both like history. So when I got into it and I started listening to your first one and your second one, and those flew through, and I imagine they get better as I'll move on. But do you script everything, or do you just writing bullet points and reading from that, or how do you do the whole process?
So when I first started out, I was like, I'm a smart guy. I could just do bullet points and fill in the bullet points and we just work from there. I found out very quickly that I'm not that smart. So I ended up having to do script everything. So if I don't write it down, it almost doesn't get said. I've gotten to the point now where I can kind of add in things here and there, but for the most part, it's almost all totally scripted, so that I can kind of make sure that things are concise. I find that once I go off script too much, that the quality dips, and I kind of want everything to be on a nice, even scale all the way through, where it sounds like we're, I think the sound flows better that way.
It does. It sounds really natural. And now, are you taking the body of the podcast, like the actual text that you've written out? Are you putting it anywhere? Do you have a web page? Are you putting it on something?
No, we talked about this. I think on Twitter before. They're like, "Hey, what are you doing with your scripts?" And honestly, I never planned on my scripts being viewed by anyone else, so I kind of just leave them to me. It's barely English. Now, what I do like to do is take inserts from my story and I'll, post them, or I'll create audiograms and post them to Twitter, or I'll post them on Facebook and make stories out of it. So I think recently I did like the history of Satchel Paige, where my Black History podcast it talks about Satchel Paige, but it doesn't go in as in depth as this does. It's like, hey, this is a brief history of Satchel Paige. I put this on my Facebook channel. I put this on, created an audiogram for it. So I like to do that. But as far as taking the entire script, I really don't. I don't know if I feel comfortable enough.
Well, I don't know. I think if you polish them a little bit, you can put them on Medium, and Medium will monetize them.
Really? I had no idea that was even something you could do.
Yeah, wow. So you can monetize the scripts, and then if you took the audiograms and put the audiograms onto like an Instagram feed, and then had the Medium link from Instagram, because Instagram will draw the traffic, Medium will then read the article and you'll monetize it. And you can also take the MP3 and embed it into the Medium podcast, or sorry, the Medium page.
Oh, wow. See, I'm learning today. I had no idea that was a thing.
Well, I'm just throwing it out there, man. I think like it's a, because I don't know if you're monetizing your podcast or not, but every little bit helps. And they're compelling, they're engaging, they're really interesting. So
right now for me, I'm mostly doing, Patreon. I just have a few subscribers, about 5. I'm making about enough to cover my server bills, which is I'm not upset. I'm not upset with that. If you get into the podcasting game, especially if you're not famous, no one's getting in this to get rich. So the fact that I can break even that's a win for me. It's just breaking even.
Yeah, no one gets into podcasting for the money, that's for sure.
No,
like just the top 5 guys like Dax Shepard and all those dudes.
Yeah.
It's yeah, they were rich to start out with.
Yeah, they were. That's the thing. If you have a name, it's easy to bring in because you ever have established audience. But for me, how do I convince you to listen to my podcast? And that's where I think the value in One Mic is, because someone asked me before when I was doing the cut, they were like, hey, what does your podcast add value to people? Like what are you giving them that they can't get anywhere else? And this is where One Mic, I think, fills a void, because there aren't very many Black history podcasts. I mean, honestly, I can only think of a handful that are active. So like, hey, this is somebody, he's active, he's creating. Matter of fact, you can give me ideas. I would consider doing an episode on that particular subject. So I think this is really where it adds value for people, is that it's not very many of us.
Do you have a history background, or what made you get into this?
I enjoy history. It's one of the things that I've always enjoyed as a kid. Just me and my dad, because he's also in the history. So we'll just sit and talk and watch football and talk history for hours. So previous to this, I mean, I enjoyed it, but I don't have a history background. I don't even have a degree. I'm just a guy with a bit of a passion project, something that I really enjoy. I thought it was, I think it was interesting, and I get the ability to learn with my audience, because I go into these, because when the Negro Leagues, for instance, I didn't know very much about the Negro Leagues. I don't even like baseball. So I went into it, I thought it was an interesting subject, not knowing that it was like 80 years of complex history. So I thought it was going to be a short 40-minute episode, and it turned out to be a 4-episode epics, 4 hours of work.
Yeah, I could see that. But it's just made the news too, because they finally announced it as a major league.
Right.
About time, and I think you picked a great time to release the podcast on that.
Yeah. And honestly, I had no idea that was something that was coming up. But after doing the episodes on the Negro Leagues, I could see the need for it and why this is something that I'm surprised it hadn't happened yet, because those guys were some of the best baseball players at the time. They just didn't have the ability to play in the major leagues. I mean, somebody like a Satchel Paige or Rube Foster, at the time, even the time they played, those guys were like, hey, these are some of the best pitchers, some of the best players in the world. If they didn't have dark skin, they'd be playing in the major leagues right now. Yeah,
it's interesting. And now what podcast are you listening to then? Like you said, you like history podcasts, but are you listening to other podcasts as well too?
Wow. I listen to, one of my favorites is Dan Carlin. Matter of fact, his was the one that really got me into this idea of doing a history podcast, even though I could never stand on any level with his, but listening to the fact that a guy could put together a podcast where it's 4 hours and keep you engaged for 4 hours. He didn't even have a release schedule. He just drops them when he drops them. Hey, I'm ready. Here's a 4-hour podcast.
He just talks. Yeah, I don't think he researches that. I think he's like, I think I'll just talk about 1642 and Napoleon and just jump into it. And that's, dang, 4 hours later, it's like you just felt like you left the history
that I can't
university.
I don't understand how that's even possible. I'm actually uber impressed with him. And then I saw him on YouTube. He was doing Freeland's podcast. he was doing an interview, and the guy was just interviewing about history and things. And I was like, wow, like you really sound like that. That your voice is so engaging. Even when you're not doing your history podcast, you just sound like somebody I would want to listen to for 4 straight hours. So it's one of my favorites. Outside of that, I like the dollop, even though I find it a little bit, kind of silly and absurd. But the fact that you can make it a show, a history, a podcast about a sandwich or things like that, or you can have it where you just kind of talk about things and joke. Like I don't understand how that works for them, but it works in this podcasting format. Outside of that, I don't listen to, those are pretty much the history podcasts I listen to. I listen to a lot of comedy podcasts, like, Did You Miss Me? I also have a lot of guys that I listen to that I'm friends with that I also listen to theirs on a weekly basis because I just I like them. So I want to support, their podcasts like, OTR or Raw and Uncut or Not Perfect, Just Broke because I like what they do. I like their work they put in.
How are you finding the time to listen to them all?
Well, right now, because of the pandemic, it forced me way more time than I normally would have. I was working with Microsoft as a contractor, and that ended in July. With the pandemic, I've been just looking for work. But this time, my son was about 6 months at the time, so I just took the time and was just, hey, I'm gonna bang out episodes of my podcast. I'm going to spend this time with my son, enjoying the time with my son, and, listen to other people's work. So I wanted to be productive while I was out of work.
Yeah. Were you like tech support with Microsoft, or what did you do for them?
I was a support engineer for Microsoft. I've been working in IT for maybe 15 years or so. And I went to Microsoft. I left a full-time position for Microsoft to go work at Microsoft. Because I thought, hey, this is what you do in IT. This is like, the master class in IT tech support. But after, 18 months, they have a rule, 18.6, that you can be there for 18 months and have to be gone for 6 months. So they kind of just dropped you off in the middle of a pandemic. And I don't want to say it left a sour taste in my mouth, but I still really enjoy working there. So if I got an opportunity, I probably would go back. Yeah,
well, the 6 months will be up in January, won't it? February, whatever it is.
Yeah, it's in January. So I'll be able to go back in January. I'll probably have glutton for punishment because I'll probably definitely be going back.
Anyway, we got a little bit off topic there. So
yeah, we did. Speaking
of hardware, what do you use for your mics?
Man, I have a this Samson mic. You can kind of see it a little bit. Honestly, I need to upgrade all my hardware. I have some like 8 blue snowballs over here because when I had people come over the house, we would take. One thing about this hardware though, and that's not that great. I can kind of so let me start over. I use the cheapest hardware I could find because I didn't know if I wanted to do this. Not just one mic, but the cut. I wanted to see whether or not this was a viable thing for me, something that I would enjoy. So I knew a guy who was already doing a podcast. He does The Black Guy Who Tips. He's really, really popular. One of the few that can make money on their own. He doesn't work. He just podcasts. I was like, hey, I want to get into this. What do you use? He's like, before you do this, buy cheap mics. See if you want to do this. So I bought cheap mics and I used a virtual mixer. So all this hardware is just really just cheap stuff. It's mostly free. I don't use anything that I couldn't get free. So at this point, I probably need to start upgrading my hardware, but I think the sound is fine and I can really get by with just cheap mics. I mean, even when I do one mic, all I do to avoid, explosions is just put a sock over it. So I'm running like really cheap shop.
That's a fantastic idea. Why didn't I think of that? Because I definitely speak with a pop.
Yeah. Well,
I'm a spray it, not say it guy.
Do you notice? I don't know if you noticed on the first episode, a lot. Somebody even commented on it, like, "Hey, you're having a lot of explosions," and I was like, "Well, how can I get around this?" And I was going to buy one of those, guards, but then someone was like, "Hey, just use the sock." Yeah, you're one of the guards. They're like, "Hey, just use the sock." I was like, "Okay," and I used the sock, and it was fine. I've been using it ever since, and I've never really had any issues.
Dude, that's a great idea. Huh. I'm actually giving away a mic on my YouTube channel.
Really?
In case you want to go check it out, go to the Aud Pod on YouTube. And
I do need a new mic. I need to stop being cheap.
I'm cheap. I mean, this Blue Yeti, I think I paid $50 for it used. Yeah. And then I'm running it through my MacBook Pro that I've already had. And then I use GarageBand to edit. And GarageBand's free. Though I have a copy of Logic Pro, but I just I've never used it.
I'm using Audacity, and I'm using what's the name of this? Voice Meter as a virtual mixer, which for the Samson mic. It's really, really cheap setup. Everything I use is free. Even for videos, I think I'm using, what is the name of this software? I am using VideoPad, which is also a free product. Even though, if anything I want to upgrade in the future is the quality of my videos. I think putting these videos on YouTube where I just kind of narrate and I give you, like right now, I'm just giving you pictures, but I want to get to the place where, and this is where I would like to make more money, is so I can, pay for someone to actually make good videos. Because one of the things about podcasting is you didn't know I needed to be a video editor or all these things. I didn't know I needed these skills. So now that I'm here, I'm like, I'm not equipped to do this in a, the best fashion. You see what I'm saying? So I feel like I need to pay someone to make this better, to do this better. So I think that would be the next step for me, is to make professional looking YouTube videos for my podcast. I think that would really take, at least on YouTube, to the next level.
See, like I said, though, I would save that and go with the Instagram and put the Audiograms up there and then link it back to Medium, for example. And then once you get big enough, you can also join a network, like a podcasting network.
Yeah.
And then they would hire the person to do the YouTube videos for you.
Yeah.
You wouldn't make as much money, but you just got to hand it off and let them handle it.
Yeah, it would be easier that way. It'd be easier not to have to be able to push some of these things off. Even the editing would be nice to not have to do it, because it's so painful. It takes the most time out of anything. The editing is horrible. It's like 5-6 hours of listening to myself not be able to speak English.
Well, that's because you're scripting them and you're hammering them out that way, and that's hard.
It is hard.
It's difficult. I can relate with that. I tried scripting a few of them. I'm like, wow, this is way too much work. Like 2 hours to write it up and then another hour to chop it all up. And I'm like, oh, this is so much. It's easier for me just to talk to you and interview it and slice and dice. And
that's the thing. I was reason why I didn't want to script it, because I felt like knew this was going to be difficult. But the funny thing is about the script, that you think that just would be easy. Hey, I could just bang this out with minimal errors. But what happens is 30 minutes in, you can't speak English anymore. I can't talk. So I ended up having to go back and edit through all of these errors that I made, and it sucks. But it's worth it. In the end, it's worth it. I really enjoy the end result, and people come to me and they're like, I love what you're doing. I love the work that you put in. And it kind of makes it worth it after you spend these late nights, 3-4 hours editing your editing your episode just to put it out for the next day or whatever.
Yeah. Well, and you can also take a bit of a break and go and interview like history professors, for example.
Yeah.
And you're in North Carolina, so you have one of the best universities around. UNC is right there. And just go talk to their history department and say, listen, I'd like to interview a few PhD students that specialize in Black history. And I bet you
once again, I've never thought about these.
Dude, that's why people listen to my podcast, because it's not, I just don't sit here and talk with you. We sit there and we talk about the business of podcasting.
That's a great idea. I really like you come with great ideas. My aunt, she mentioned the idea of trying to get a grant, possibly trying to get my podcast. when I tried to explore that idea, it was a bit too late in the season. I'm probably going to start back up again in January. I know that at least Google has one where they offer a grant. It's more not really for history. It just make your podcast better. They have like a course, but at the end of the course, if they select it, they give you like $10,000 to work towards making your podcast better. I was like, so you're going to teach me and you're going to give you money? Like, where do I sign up?
Well, on the flip side of that too, if you apply to UNC or any university and become a student, then the grants are also available there to students.
Right.
And
right.
You could use this as course curriculum. So they might even give you credits already because of all the work you've done for the research.
Once again, I never thought about that.
Sorry, dude. I'm not trying to lay it all on you here, but
these are great ideas. I should be writing these down.
Well, you can listen to the podcast later. I'll send you the unedited version and you can go through it. But I think that's all I had. I just wanted to grab your time for 30 minutes and chat. And I'd love to talk to you again in a few months and see how things come. Because what's going to happen? What will happen when you go back to work? I mean, you'll have no time. So what's going to happen to the podcast then?
Well, I am about to finish up the season. So I'm in my mind, I'm discussing maybe doing one more episode after I have one more episode of the Negro Leagues where I talk about integration. And then I'm thinking about doing maybe one more episode on the Great Depression, on African Americans and the Great Depression. And then that's probably going to be the end of my season. So from that point, I'm going to take those couple of months to kind of storyboard my next season, what I want to go through it, make these scripts on my time, because I did this season on the fly. So I was just putting things out this every couple of weeks on the fly. My plan going forward after the season is over is to take that a couple of months and to make the season before I start publishing. So I can kind of take my time and I'm not in a hurry or a rush because I feel like I'm not, meeting the schedule that I made for my own self.
They're time consuming. And does your wife support this? Is she happy that you're taking time away from the family and stuff to work on them?
She is half and half. So she loves it. She loves the idea. She thinks it's great. She also sees the long-term viability in it, like I do, because I honestly, and I know I've mentioned it, no one gets in this podcast to make money, but I kind of feel like this is the sort of thing that would make money, eventually, even though this is not, I'm not quite there yet, but I've seen, a huge amount of growth. Whereas, looking at it from the cut, it grew and it became very stagnant. But One Mic is even bigger than the cut ever was. And I can continue to see this pattern of growth to where I could possibly make money. Like I'm not, not gonna be Joe Rogan on a yacht, but I could see the point where this could make, a couple $100 a month, supplemental income. It's a nice side hustle. So she likes the idea that I have a side hustle and that this is something that, a legacy or, something my son can look back on. Hey, look what your dad made. So, but on the flip side of that, she doesn't like me staying up to 3 a.m. editing episodes. She wants me to come to bed. So
you need a schedule then.
Yeah, I do. I should be actually doing this in the morning. I work better at night, but I should be doing this when she's working. I should be doing episodes, not sleeping.
Yeah, I'm more creative at night when it comes to editing.
Yeah,
especially after I smoke a joint or something.
Yeah.
But in the morning, I find I get more done. I'll bang out 100 videos for YouTube, for example. And I'll edit them all at night.
I need to definitely come up with the schedule, even though she's very, she's behind me. She just wants me to set up seasons. So she's okay with all of what I'm doing. She realized that I enjoy podcasting and she affords me the ability to do this because she's watching my son as we speak. So what she just wants from me is just, hey, set up a schedule or, this is what I'm doing on this time, knowing ahead of time. As long as I have a schedule or she's, knows what I'm up to, it's fine. It's fine.
And have you thought of asking her to do the voiceover work for any of the readings?
I don't know if she'd like to do that. She's a bit apprehensive, one, getting in front of the mic, even though she's done several episodes of The Cut. But because she's a state employee, she kind of feels like she's neutered a bit in what
no
she
opinions
can say.
allowed.
No, she's not allowed an opinion, even if she's doing narration. So she's kind of just like, I'm gonna just stand off and sit in the background, just because I don't want to end up in the newspapers because I said something I shouldn't have.
Yeah, well, like I said, I think you should polish it up and put it on Medium. And that is a paid process. Like, they do pay you once you acquire a certain amount of readers, and it's evergreen content. I mean, people will look into this, 20 years from now, for all we know. So They might be doing their research on it. I mean, it's interesting information. It's not readily available from anyone else. And if you're the one that kind of takes a story and tells it, I think that people will be looking for them for a long time.
I like that. I like that idea. I mean, because I was thinking about the idea of polishing up my episodes, the scripts anyway, just because in my mind, so I would do a script and they just be willy-nilly spelling errors. As long as I knew what I was attempting to say, that was fine. But the idea that hey, maybe I may be able to use this going forward, or put these scripts out so people can read them, had already begun kind of polishing them up anyway. So I think that's an avenue I'm going to take. I like that idea a lot. I like that. Yeah, I'm already writing.
Well, that's the thing is, when I was reading the one article, or listening to the one article, sorry, and you're saying the guy had the can of coffee shot and he spilt it and stuff, I thought, geez, you could almost go and track down his relatives or relatives in the stories to get more information from other characters, and even just branch off and follow up with those.
Yeah.
Just to see what they're...
That was the Harlem Hellfighters episode. I like that one. That was
well, like, I only listened to the first two. Like I said, the Houston Riot and the Harlem Hellfighters. And I guess Hell's Kitchen must have came from the Harlem Hellfighters. I don't know. Did it come from?
I think they got the name from the Germans. The Germans, when they were fighting in France, the Germans felt like that the black soldiers were fought tougher than anyone else they faced, so they gave them that nickname of Hellfighters. The best nicknames are given to you by someone else.
And like the Tuscany Airmen, I think that's been overdone. So I kind of like how you've done, different things that I'm not familiar with.
I liked, when I first went into this, I had the idea that I was going to do just one era at a time. So I kind of wanted to do this time from like the turn of the century up until 1930. The problem with history, and one thing that I didn't realize going into this, is that history they don't have boundaries. So you'll tell a story like the Great Migration, and it will go well past the 1930s, because it's happened twice. It was a Great Migration during the 1915 to around the mid of the 20s. It got stopped by the Great Depression, and then started up again after World War II. Well, I didn't even do the second part, and the counterpart of me going back, thinking about it, I was like, I should have just did both of them at the same time. Why limit yourselves to a particular era? If a story needs to be told that goes past the time period that you had set, you need to tell all of it. So as I've gone, I've kind of just, hey, I'm not going to let the limitations that I set on my podcast stop me from telling the complete story. So going forward, I'm going to try to tell the complete story. And I think I might go back and redo the Great Depression, the Great Migration, to tell the entire story, where I do both. I tell both of them and probably re-record them. I kind of felt that way. And even the Harlem Hellfighter one, I didn't like my voice. I kind of wanted to find my groove. So that's what I think I am now. I want to go back and kind of re-record those and make them better.
Yeah, or at least expand on them, I guess. But I thought they were fantastic. I really enjoyed them. I'm going to listen to the rest of them as I find time.
No worries.
It's really interesting. But, I think I got everything I needed from you here. I really appreciate your time.
No worries.
I had a lot of fun. And like I said, we'll follow up in a few months and see how things are going then.
Yeah, I would really love to be interviewed again. We'll find out, see where I am in a few months.
Can I ask you one quick question though? What are your downloads like? You have 13 episodes, right?
Yeah.
Can I ask how many downloads you get like per episode?
I'm doing about 250 in about 30 days. So they're not, extraordinary by any means. It's probably about, if you were going by percentages, a little bit over average, even though I went into this, I had no audience. When I first couple of episodes, I barely had any. Right. So the fact that I'm doing 250 now, once again, I can kind of see the growth. They aren't, I kind of felt like I thought they would be better. So I'm kind of looking to the downloads would be better. So I'm kind of looking at ways to how can I make these more entertaining for the listener, maybe adding music or maybe trying to attempt to be more engaging with my voice or with my scripts. But I can see the growth. I can see the growth in them.
I think so too. And I think, I hate the term Black History Month. I hate that term. Yeah. And I think that you're going to get a lot of plagiarism come February when kids are doing the reports.
I like the idea of doing Black History every day. Usually when I'll put on my scripts that I put out on Facebook, Black History 24/7. So the idea is that every day Black History. Every day we're talking about Black history. Every day I'm gonna give you something, even if it's not, everything doesn't have to be sad or it doesn't have to be hardship. I can give you, good stories. I could talk about, Henry Black Death Johnson and how he fought off a whole, 13 Germans, or I can talk about the Negro Leagues and Satchel Paige and how he was probably the greatest pitcher of all time. And he played for 30 some odd years where he played, 2,000 games. So the idea is I just want to keep giving people, excerpts from history, and whether I put that on my Facebook page or on my Instagram or on Twitter or put out a new episode, I'm going to continuously give you information so that you can come and look, to my source for, Black history. You can learn something today.
Yeah, well, definitely gonna point my kids towards it. That's for sure. And where can people find you online?
You can find me. I'm on Instagram at the Cut Podcast. I'm on Twitter at One Mic History. I am on YouTube at the Cut Podcast. I am on Facebook at the Cut Podcast. So a lot of these systems I was already on. I just kind of rolled my content in with the Cut Podcast that I was already doing. But at this point, One Mic has kind of taken over, where it's pretty much all the content that I push out because I put so much work and time and effort into it.
Yeah, I think you might have to change the names of those other.
I think I am. I think at some point everything is going to be One Mic. I haven't done it yet, but at this point, it's so much of my content that it doesn't seem fair to even, because if you have a tough time finding me because you didn't know I had two podcasts, So I think at some point it's all going to be One Mic Media.
Yeah, that would make sense. OMM, One Mic Media.
Yeah,
something like that. We should also. Well, I'd like to see you be like a guest on Stuff You Missed in History Class or something with Holly Fry or Tracy B. Wilson.
We did. I was a guest on one of my friends' podcasts talking about Lovecraft Country, and I'm not sure if you've watched the show, but the show had a lot of historical significance. So they brought me in to kind of talk about the historical significance of a lot of the events that went on in Lovecraft Country. So it's the first time I've ever been on a show where someone brought me in to be a subject matter expert for history, but it was also great because I have a passion for that sort of thing. So when I see stuff in the show, I was looking it up anyway. Okay, well, what about this? And not to make this longer than what it should be, but for instance, in the very beginning of that show, there's they're on a segregated bus. This was he was a Korean War vet, so we know this was after 1950. Well, in 1946, the Supreme Court ruled that all buses needed to be integrated. So we know this was after 1950. The buses should have been integrated, but this bus wasn't. It was still segregated. But what I found out is that the South primarily ignored the Supreme Court ruling and was still having segregated buses. So if you took a bus from, let's say, Boston, Chicago, that bus would have been integrated. But if you're taking a bus from Florida to Chicago, which he was in the beginning of this story, it would have still have been segregated, which it was. And this shows the effort, energy, and time that they put in the show to make this stuff historically accurate, because most people would not even care to look that up or even thought about it.
Yeah, you're right. 100%. It's crazy history. And I hate, it's just, you don't want to forget about it though, because you don't want to repeat it.
Yeah. And
it has been remembered. And
not only, just having people remember the stories, but, and not repeating it, but I want to show stuff that's positive. So much of Black history is just Black people being victims. And that's the case a lot, but we weren't always victims. And there are good stories that can be told within that, where you can find something that you can hang on to. Oh, wow, I didn't know that happened. I didn't know that they did this, like even in the Red Summer, those guys, the Red Summer was a series of race riots throughout the 1919. But what they don't tell you during that story is that a lot of those guys fought back in Chicago. They put up barriers in their neighborhoods and fought back against those riots to tempt people from destroying their neighborhoods in the South Side of Chicago. So, you tell these stories, you're not always a victim in these stories. There are stories where we attempted to try to not have you burned out an entire town. And even Tulsa, they fought back. One of the reasons why it's got started is because the Black servicemen went up to the courthouse to attempt to try to hey, do you need help? And the group of people saw that it was 75 Black dudes with guns, and it scared them. So these are stories that need to be told, and I'm passionate about it. I think it's great.
Yeah, I really enjoy it. I gotta let you go though, because I'm well over my time period here. My kids.
Yeah. I'm over my time. My producer is going to be coming in a moment to come get me.
All right, man. Well, listen, it was great talking to you. I can't wait to talk to you again, and keep in touch.
All right. You have a good day, man.
You too, man. Take care. Right. Thanks very much.
Bye.
See ya. Well, that was fun. I really enjoyed that. Okay. I got to edit it, and it's been 47 minutes.